This is Histories and Mysteries. I'm one of your hosts, Ashley, and this is
Jessica. And on this week's episode, Ashley is going to be talking about the true story behind The Exorcist.
dun dun dun.
Da-da-da-da-da. And I am going to be talking about a pretty messed up dude by the name of Jeffrey Dahmer.
Dun dun dun.
So it's gonna be a wild episode.
Yeah, it's gonna be a heavy episode.
Yes. So I'm just gonna tell you all right now, if you don't want to listen to my story, that's fine, because I do get into some graphic stuff. So if that bothers you, I'm just gonna let you know right now instead of telling you every time something pops up, because
Yeah.
he's super messed up. So
Yeah, he is not a normal guy.
no, but I have some articles on him. Like I just used one article, I guess, about him and his crimes, and then I watched an interview, so you kind of get his thoughts on things and looking into his parents. And so
Yeah, I'm super excited for that interview because just trying to understand his brain and how it works, I think is going to be really interesting.
yeah, you're definitely not going to be getting the kind of answers that you want out of him, and it's kind of infuriating, but it's still very interesting nonetheless.
Yeah.
My best friend just sent me, okay, do you know like that makeup girl on YouTube that like talks about crimes and stuff?
Oh, I've heard of her, yeah.
Okay, anyways, in the first picture, it's basically her just saying, "I love cults." And then be like, And
Huh.
my best friend just sent it to me, and she's like, "You talking about Jonestown?"
Truth. Oh goodness.
It's so interesting. Jonestown is so fascinating. I can't wait to like go over that with you guys next month.
Yeah, Jonestown is a very interesting one.
Honestly, cults. I do love cults.
Really
I do love them. They're very, very, very cool. I think next week I'm talking about Heaven's Gate.
Mm-hmm.
So super excited about that one.
Speaking of cults,
Yeah.
did you hear? So this will be a week ago when this episode airs, that the leader of the Nexium cult just got sentenced to 120 years in prison.
What?
Yeah.
No, I did not hear that. I didn't even know about that
Yeah.
cult until you told me about it. So
Yeah, I'm gonna be doing Nexium cult
when I do Heaven's
pretty
Gate.
soon here.
Next week when I do Heaven's Gate.
Yeah. So I'm really interested to do it because I don't know a ton about the cult. I mean, I know a little bit, but I'm excited to really dive in.
I don't know anything about it. Like I've literally heard jack squat about it. So
did you ever watch Smallville?
No. Like not to the point that I would remember anything, but like I watched it if it was on TV, because Tom Welling is just
gorgeous.
gorgeous.
Do you remember the girl that played his best friend, the blonde?
No.
Okay, well she's in the cult.
Oh. Well, that's fascinating.
So,
anyways, that's what you guys have to look forward to next week.
Yeah. So let's talk about, when we were talking about Jeffrey Dahmer, I was going to say, well, let's start off with something a little lighter, The Exorcist.
Well, it's like spooky and it's not 100% crime.
Yeah.
Not about eating people.
Yeah. So The Exorcist, like the last week, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, was based on a true story, but the true story was a little boy that was possessed, not a little girl.
Oh.
Yeah. And they never reveal his real name or his family's name. So he is just known as Roland Doe.
Okay. Sorry. Like rolling the dough.
Rolando.
Oh
Yeah,
my
I don't
god.
know how they came up with that pseudonym, but yeah,
That's so weird.
Rolando. So,
Alright.
and it does take place in, there's different accounts. Some say Washington, D.C., some say Maryland. If you live in that area, you know that it's just all kind of Virginia, Maryland, Washington, D.C. It's the same thing. But anyway, so our story starts off in that area in the late teen, the late 1940s
Okay.
when Roland was 13 years old.
Can we just call him Rolly?
Roly poly.
Roly poly
Um,
oly.
so right during this time, Roland is devastated because his aunt passed away, and he was really close with his aunt.
Mm.
She was a spiritualist, and she taught him how to use the Ouija board. Jessica.
I was waiting for that.
I messaged her earlier today, and I was like, I just yelled at you in my notes.
Twice, in fact.
Oh yeah, there's another one coming. Don't worry.
Yeah, you yelled at me twice,
Uh,
and then I asked, does it have to do with a Ouija board?
and I said yes.
Yes, it does.
So, before I get into it, my sources. I
You're already into it.
ah, I used All That's Interesting.
Woohoo.
And have you ever heard of the podcast Crime Junkies?
Yes.
So the host of that, Ashley Flowers, has another podcast called Supernatural with Ashley Flowers, and it's a Parcast podcast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so she's like really doing it, you know.
That's good.
Um,
I like them.
yeah, I do too. But she covered this story and it was really, really good. So I got a lot of information from that podcast too. And you know, her iconic voice is just like butter
Yes.
to listen to.
It's so nice.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so Roland, his aunt just passed away, and he would use the Ouija board for hours trying to contact his aunt.
Oh, wow.
Um, and this story itself is one of the most documented exorcism cases we have because the priest, Raymond Bishop, kept a written log throughout the entire exorcism, hoping that, you know, one day others could use it if they need to fight again against demons.
Perfect. At least you're
Yeah,
being smart about it.
right. And there were almost 40 witnesses to this exorcism. So, and they all corroborated Father Bishop's story.
Wow.
So it's a pretty, you know, we can take it for its word. It seems pretty legit.
Yeah.
So shortly after his aunt's death, Roland and his grandmother said his grandmother lived with them and they were hanging out one day and they said they started to hear a dripping noise in the house. And they kind of started looking all over for it, and upon further inspection, they decided that it was coming from the grandmother's room.
Okay.
Later that night, the dripping stopped.
And his
And they
grandmother?
heard
Sorry.
no. The dripping stopped and they heard a scratching coming from under her bed.
Mm-mm.
They figured it was probably a rat or a raccoon or something along those lines, but a local exterminator who came the next morning found nothing. He even ripped up the floorboards and put like poison down there.
Wow.
But he didn't find anything. And for the next 11 days, these scratches started every night at 7 p.m. and continued until midnight that same night.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's very specific.
Yeah. And under your bed.
Yeah, ew.
After that night, so after the 11 nights, the scratching stopped in the grandma's room. But new noises appeared in Roland's room. He started to hear squeaky shoes walking
Ew.
like up and down his bed.
Ew.
Yeah. So again, like I said, the aunt was a spiritualist and they believed at the time, her type of spiritualism believed that there couldn't be malevolent spirits that would take you over if you were like a medium and trying to contact people. They believe that they had some sort of kind of shield to it.
Okay.
And so I'm sure that, you know, she passed on this thought and knowledge to her sister, Roland's mother. And the mother decided to try and contact whatever it was that was making these noises in their house. Jessica, because I can
Well,
see you doing that.
yeah. Gotta try and understand it.
So his mother asked, if you are Helen, who that was the aunt's name, knock 3 times. They heard 3 knocks on the floor beneath them. She then said, okay, let me just make sure. If you are Helen, knock 4 times. They heard 4 knocks.
Mm.
They felt relief flood over them as they realized it was their beloved family member. But suddenly, the scratching noise was back. Instead
Ew.
of coming from like inside the house floorboards, they were coming from inside the mattress.
Ew.
The mattress began to shake violently and just as quickly stopped. The edges of the blankets flew out, untucked from the mattress, and stood there suspended in the air like an arch.
Mm. Don't like that.
Yeah. One of them reached out to touch the blanket. It laid back down, only to start up the scratching noise in the mattress once again. Things eventually started to fly around Roland. For example, a pear and an apple just flew next to him. A Bible, and even his desk at school started to slam into other kids' desks. Which creeps me out because that means that, like, it is for sure him because it followed him to school. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
One afternoon, Roland was sitting in an armchair in the living room, and his family watched as the chair lifted in the air and flipped over, tipping Roland out.
Mm.
At the same time, a vase rose into the air and smashed against the wall. His family consulted doctors, who said he was fine, psychiatrists, who also said he was fine, and finally their local Lutheran pastor. The pastor suggested that both he and his mom spend the night at the pastor's place so that he could observe the boy, and he felt that he would be less likely to perform any pranks if this was a prank if he was in someone else's house. During the night, Roland's bed began shaking, so the priest told him to move to an armchair. The chair then leaned to one side until Roland fell out. The priest said it looked as if Roland was in a trance while the chair was leaning, and he didn't move at all. Like, he didn't move to brace himself or anything. He just tumbled out. So the pastor gave him a blanket and said, well, just lay on the floor for now. And at 3 a.m., there's your 3 a.m., Jessica.
Haha.
At 3 a.m., him and his blanket started to move across the floor, like being pulled across the floor until he was under the original bed, and he started to lift in the air and smack against the metal springs and then back down and then up and down and up and down and up and down. And the priest said during this time, he didn't flinch once. It was just like he was in a trance. So the priest ran over and pulled him out, and his face was bloody from where it was hitting the metal springs.
Wow.
Yeah. So the priest said, hey, I think you should contact the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
So they did. And once he was given permission, Father E. Albert Hughes agreed to do the exorcism. Now, Hughes was only 29, so he was relatively young. And one of the things the Catholic Church suggests is using a older, more experienced priest to do exorcisms. So it was kind of an iffy thing in the beginning. He stated that when Roland walked in the room, it became cold and he could feel an evil. He further solidified his stance when Roland spoke in perfect Latin, saying, you know I'm the devil, why do you keep bothering me?
Ah, I don't like that.
Yeah. Father Hughes had Roland stay in a Catholic hospital to perform the exorcism, feeling that with the nuns taking care of him and just being around all that religiousness, it would be helpful. He started to perform an exorcism. on Roland, but quickly discontinued the rite when Roland broke off a piece of the spring from the mattress that he was strapped to and lashed the priest from his shoulder to his wrist.
What?
Apparently, the cut was so bad that it required over 100 stitches, and he never regained complete use of his arm.
Wow.
Yeah. So his parents were trying to figure out what to do. And because the father refused to do an exorcism on him after that.
Well, no kidding.
Yeah. And one of their thoughts was they had family in St. Louis. And they thought that maybe they could get him better help there. So they had kind of contemplating going to St. Louis, but they were unsure of it. Until one night, red scratches appeared on Roland's stomach and formed the word Louis. So his mother took this as a sign that they had to go to St. Louis, where they had family to help him. Which, what if that's just the demon trying to trick you, you know?
Yeah.
But they went to St. Louis. So once there, his cousin who went to a university there, one of her professors was Father Bishop, who was the one that kept all the notes for us for this.
Okay.
Father Bishop heard the family out, but he was very skeptical. I mean, they teach you to be skeptical, obviously, within the church. Plus, he was in academia, so he was skeptical kind of to begin with. But he decided to hear the family out and wanted to see for himself. So he went to the family's house to bless it. While there, Father Bishop sprinkled holy water, specifically on Roland's bed, and then fastened like a holy artifact to his pillow. Roland went to bed that night, but the adults heard a loud thumping noise and screaming. And this is so creepy. They ran up to find Roland completely still in the middle of his bed with his mattress shaking.
Ew.
Bishop sprinkled holy water on the bed, which stopped the movement of the bed. So he was like, okay, good. He left the room. The Father Bishop left the room. And the bed started shaking again. At this point, Roland began to scream and lifted his shirt to reveal red scratches on his chest. After this, Father Bishop agreed to perform the exorcism with the help of his friend and another priest. The Catholic Church said, okay, you can do the exorcism, but you have to use priest Bowdern, I think it's Bowdern, to help you with this. He was very experienced. He was a very pious man, and they thought he would, be perfect for this. And there were several other like priests and assistants that would help throughout the exorcism. But he was, Bowdern was, I think it's Bowdern. She said it so many times in her podcast. Bowdern. I'm gonna go with Bowdern.
Okay.
But they said that Bowdern was going to be the head of the exorcism. Like he was the one that was going to do it and run it. During the exorcism, Roland's bed would shake violently. Every time Bowdern would say the Lord's name, Roland would scream out and a new red welt would appear on his chest.
Wow.
Bowdern commanded the demon to reveal his name and asked when he would leave. 4 letters formed on Roland's chest. H-E-L-L.
Yuck.
Then another 2 letters. G-O. Then the priest asked, when are you leaving? And on his right leg, the Roman numeral for 10, an X, appeared. So the priest assumed that this meant 10 days is how long he would be there. Hours later, the priest was still praying over him, and he screamed, I cast you out. Roland sat up and started to sing and sway to music, faster and faster until he was just speaking gibberish. It was unintelligible what he was saying. And because of this, the priest knew that Roland was fully possessed now. That night, Roland finally fell asleep at 7 a.m., and the exorcism was over for that night. Uh, the priests started noticing a pattern to Roland's behavior. He was calm and normal during the day, but at night he would start to exhibit strange behavior. He would scream and have wild outbursts. He would enter trance like states and make growling type noises. The priest would see objects flying around him, as well as violent reactions when religious artifacts were shown. They also saw a pitchfork shaped pattern of red lines move from his thigh to his ankle. They specifically said it like snaked down his leg.
That's gross.
Yeah. On the ninth night of the exorcism, it was a holy night, the feast of Saint Gabriel, and Father Bowdern also decided to hold that night's exorcism in his room in the rectory, hoping to add extra holy power on this already holy night. But it was a really bad night. The demons taunted everyone, warned one, "You will be in hell with me," in 1957. So he like predicted some guy's death. The next night, the 10th night, was also held in the rectory. This was supposed to be the last night they had hoped. During this night, there was no taunting, no urinating, no reacting to the Lord's name. Roland just thrashed silently until he fell asleep. The next day, Bowdern sent Roland home to see if the demon had left. Nothing that happened that night and for several nights after. But then one night at 11 p.m., Roland said he felt sick, and his mother told him just to go to bed. She was probably just wishing beyond wish that he was just tired because everything had been fine for a few days, so she probably was hoping it was over. But Roland begged his entire family to come up to his room with him, which can't be good. They all went up. Roland sat on the bed, snapped his eyes shut, and started tracing letters on his bedsheet with his finger. He then said, "I will stay 10 days, but will return in 4. If you stay and become a Catholic, it will stay away. You may not believe me, but then Roland will suffer forever." So they took this to mean that Roland had to be baptized. So they decided to do so. On the way to the baptism, Roland once again fell into a trance, and the demon surfaced, stating, "So you are going to baptize me, and you think you will drive me out with Holy Communion?" He then lunged forward from the back seat, grabbed the steering wheel, and tried to steer them off the road.
What?
His uncle, the driver, pulled the emergency brake just in time as Roland turned and tried to strangle his mother. It took both his dad and his uncle to pull him off.
Wow.
This is a 13-year-old boy.
Yeah.
It took 2 grown men to pull him off. Once there, it took 4 attempts to baptize Roland, and it also took 5 tries to get him to successfully swallow the communion wafer. As soon as he did, Roland came out of his trance and became calm. That night, they performed another exorcism. Bowdern asked the demon again when he was leaving, and a new Roman numeral was inscribed in his leg, 18, which to them meant April 18, which was 16 days from then. Every night they continued the exorcism, and poor little Roland would be covered in welts and slashes, only to disappear in the morning to start again the next night. On April 18th, Bowdern spoke English in his prayers and spoke softly instead of speaking the traditional Latin and kind of yelling at him. And he commanded the demon to leave. Roland bent and writhed. It is said that at one point he was bent so far backwards that his shoulder blades touched the soles of his feet. Then it went quiet.
Sorry, I keep forgetting that like people can't see my face.
Then a new voice spoke. It was deep and clear, and it said, "Satan, Satan, I am Saint Michael, and I command you, Satan, to leave the body in the name of Dominus immediately. Now, now, now." Roland twisted and stopped, opened his eyes, and said, "He's gone," in his own voice. Roland came out of the trance. He said that he had a vision that Saint Michael vanquished Satan on a great battlefield, and then he woke up. Roland went on to live a perfectly normal life and never had another issue again. He married and named his first son Michael. Bowdern died in 1983, and Halloran, another priest that was in the exorcism, was the longest to live out of them, and he died in 2005 of cancer. If Roland is still alive today, which we're not 100% sure of, but if he is, he would be in his in his 80s. So it makes sense that the adults have since passed on.
Yes.
The room in the hospital that he was in for that last exorcism was, as soon as he left, it was boarded up and sealed. And then eventually the whole hospital was torn down in 1978.
Wow.
And that is the true story of The Exorcist.
Nice. I liked it.
Thanks. It was a little bit shorter, but I know your Jeffrey Dahmer story is a little bit longer, so.
Yes. He's very long. But no, that's nice because it I didn't know that it was a boy. I always thought it was a girl.
Yep.
So that was fascinating to learn.
Just a little guy.
Yeah. That's so sad.
But happy ending for him, unlike poor Emily Rose.
Yeah. At least he lived.
Yeah.
I used only 2 sources this week. I used All That's Interesting, and I watched a YouTube video on his final interview. It was called Confessions of a Serial Killer. It's about an hour and a
Ooh.
half long if anybody wants to watch it. It was his final interview in 1994.
Not to jump way ahead, but he was executed, right?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Nope. I will tell you about it.
Okay.
Okay. So, like I said earlier, it's very graphic, so proceed at your own caution. I'm not going to be giving warnings every time something horrible happens because the whole story is just horrible. So,
because he just does all horrible things.
yeah. So, proceed at your own caution and do with this information what you will. So Jeffrey Dahmer, I'm just going to call him Dahmer throughout the whole thing. Or unless you'd rather I call him JD.
How about Jeffy? I'm just kidding.
Just kidding. It reminds me of Jeffy from The Ringer. Hi, I'm Jeffy. That's such a good movie. So Dahmer was born in 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. What I found very interesting was that from a very young age, he began to be really interested in anything related to death, and he actually started collecting animal carcasses.
Yeah.
When he was young.
Mm-hmm.
In high school, his family moved to Akron, Ohio. Akron?
Akron.
Akron, okay.
Yep.
Which, if you wanted to know, which I don't think anybody does, but it's about a 7-hour drive from...
And boo, Ohio.
Yes.
I'm from Michigan. Everybody, if anybody is from Ohio or anybody out there's from Michigan, they understand our rivalry.
Okay. I don't.
People in Michigan hate people from Ohio, and people from Ohio
Why?
hate people from Michigan. I don't know. It's just this rivalry we have. I don't understand it.
All right. Oh, okay.
I think it kind of stems to the sports, because they have Ohio State University, and Ohio State is always so good. And we have so they say their biggest rival is U of M, but a lot of times it's MSU. It just really depends on who's doing better that year. But either way, their biggest rival is a Michigan team.
Okay.
So it just I think it stems from that, and then it just kind of went to the whole state.
Okay. So it relates to the sports.
The sports.
Perfect. So when he moved for high school, he was unfortunately an outcast at his school, and sadly he became an alcoholic, often hiding alcohol in his jacket at school.
That's insane. So young.
Yeah. He did try to fit in. However, he tried to fit in by pulling practical jokes.
Oh.
Apparently one of those was pretending to have a seizure.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that won't gain you a lot of friends.
No. And he so frequently pulled these jokes that pulling off a good practical joke was often known as doing a Dahmer.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So kind of like the little boy who cried wolf, the little boy who cried Dahmer. Even though he was trying to fit in, he realized during this time period that he was actually gay. Which back then wasn't as common.
Right.
Upon this realization, his abnormal sexual fantasies also grew, and he began to think about raping men he saw walking around, and he was aroused at the thought of dominating them. This was still in high school, by the way.
Also, there's other ways that you can dominate people without raping them.
Yeah, yeah. So, but that whole aspect just aroused him. So,
Yeah.
eventually, as we all know, or as we all should know, his fantasies finally became a reality when he ended up murdering his first victim. Now, whether this was all brought on by his parents' divorce is unknown, but it was at this time that his
Mhm.
parents divorced and his father and brother lived in a nearby motel, which often left Dahmer alone in the house because his mother left town frequently.
Yeah, and didn't, like, his dad like, she left for, like, a really long time, and his dad had, like, no idea that he was living by himself?
I don't know, probably. It, like,
Yeah.
through the research, it seemed like she would just, like, periodically come and go a lot,
Mhm.
so that makes sense.
Yeah, I think at one point she, like, if not permanently, then for, like, a really long time left, and his dad, like, had no idea, and he, like, came over and he's like, Where's your mom?" And he was like, "Oh, she hasn't been here in, like, a really long time."
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I'll get into his mom later. I have some opinions on her.
Oh, good, I don't really know anything about his mom.
You don't want to.
I know a lot more about his dad. His dad seemed a lot more prevalent in, like,
He was,
the
yes.
interviews and stuff like that, so I know a
Yes.
lot more about the dad.
Yeah, his dad was. Um, so he first his first victim was in the summer of 1978, and it was an 18-year-old hitchhiker named Stephen Mark Hicks.
Mm.
Hicks was on his way to a concert, and Dahmer convinced him to return with him to his residence to have some drinks before attending the concert. And moral of the story is don't hitchhike.
Yeah, it's never a good idea.
Never a good idea. And I like did I tell this story on the podcast or did I just tell you the story? Oh, I just texted you the story about how I was driving home at 1 a.m. and I saw the truck with its four ways on the back
Yes!
road.
Yes!
And I was going to stop and be like the nice
And get murdered.
Canadian that I am and help these people out. And then I'm like, no, Jessica, it is 1 a.m. on a dark back country road and no one else is around to hear you scream if you are going to be murdered. And it was like right next to that scary cemetery. So
Well, I mean, at least you're right there.
that's very true. That's the other thing. It's super convenient for them. And there's like a giant forest on
Right.
the other side. So it's like
You
ample
would have been
spots.
I would have done a podcast about you.
Yeah. And they wouldn't have found my body. But anyway, so moral of the story is I didn't stop because it clicked in at the last second. No, I could get murdered. So
Good, I'm glad that your true crime training kicked in.
exactly. Yes. My podcast brain kicked in. So they drank for hours at Dahmer's house, and Hicks eventually got up to leave because, duh, he wanted to go to that freaking concert.
Right.
And obviously, this made Dahmer really angry. And so he hit Hicks over the head with a dumbbell, and then he strangled him to death.
Mm.
He strangled him.
Didn't he have, like, kind of like abandonment type issues where, like, if they wanted to leave like that, like, that's why he got so enraged because he didn't want them to leave him?
I think it was the fact that so I get into it in the interview portion where basically he wanted to feel close to these people and that's why he did what he
Mhm.
did. And that's why he
Gotcha.
started keeping mementos is
Right.
because he wanted to feel closer to them.
Gotcha.
So yes, I can understand the whole abandonment issues thing, especially if like his mom was coming and going and his dad wasn't really there because he was kicked out of the house and
Mhm.
so completely understand that. uh so anyways, yes, he strangled Hicks and he died, unfortunately. Once he was finally dead, Dahmer stripped him of his clothing and then he pleasured himself on top of the body,
Oh.
of the dead body.
Yeah.
So that was something else.
Mm-hmm.
He then brought Hicks's lifeless body down to the crawl space where he then dissected his body. He removed the bones, he smashed them up, and then he used acid to dissolve the rest of the body.
Removing bones, like,
Yeah.
that's a lot.
Yeah. It was probably a very lengthy process.
Yeah.
And this was still when he was in high school.
That's insane.
Yeah. So when he completed high school, he went to Ohio State University, but he dropped out.
Boo.
But he dropped out after only one term due to his continued alcoholism.
Got it.
He then joined the army as a medic before being discharged after 2 years, yet again due to his alcoholism.
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, I did too. And I'm like, shoot, he was a medic. Holy crap.
Yeah.
It later became found out that while he was in active duty, he drugged and raped 2 soldiers.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Once he was released from his duties, I read somewhere that it was like an honorable discharge. He
Okay.
he went to live with his grandmother back in Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
When he returned from duty, he decided that he was going to start pleasuring himself in front
Mm.
of children.
Oh.
And then he was drugging and raping men at gay bathhouses.
Mm-hmm.
And then he eventually ended up killing again in 1987. And that victim was 25-year-old Stephen Tuomi.
Okay.
Dahmer met Stephen at a bar where he again convinced him to return to his hotel with him. And as we can very well imagine, Dahmer got drunk.
Mm-hmm.
He claims he only wanted to drug and rape Stephen because that was his MO.
Mm-hmm.
However, when he awoke the next day, his hand was all bruised and his corpse, like Stephen's corpse, was under the hotel bed.
I forgot about that too. I remember that is so insane. And he
Yeah.
swears that he doesn't remember doing a thing, right?
To this day, he, like, well, I guess in
Yeah.
1994, he swore, like, even in that interview, that he had no idea what happened.
Yeah, and like he confessed to almost everything else, so it'd be
Yeah,
weird for him not to confess to that.
exactly. Yes.
Yeah, that's so insane.
So very crazy. I mean, he probably just got too drunk, right?
Yeah.
This murder, unfortunately, is basically what sparked his murderous spree.
Ugh.
So basically, he would go to gay bars. He would lure men back to his grandmother's home. And I have no idea where his grandmother was during this time, but okay. And then he would drug, rape, and murder these poor young men.
Mm,
During this time frame, he killed a minimum of 3 victims.
okay.
He stated during this time, quote, "It was an incessant and never-ending desire to be with someone at whatever cost. Someone good-looking, really nice-looking. It just filled my thoughts all day long," unquote.
Wow.
It's disgusting.
Yes.
He then began to collect trophies, and this began with his next victim, who was 24-year-old Anthony Sears. Like all of his other victims, he met Sears at a bar, and Sears was actually the one that approached him this time as opposed to the other way around.
Gotcha.
He then went back to Dahmer's house where he was drugged, raped, and strangled to death.
Hmm.
Dahmer then escalated from his previous dealings and he actually kept Sears' head and genitals in acetone.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Does acetone like preserve them, do you know? Or do you know what it does?
I
It's kind of
don't
a morbid question, but
I know that's like used in nail polish remover, so I don't think
right.
yeah, I don't know. I don't think it
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I have no
That's fine.
idea.
That's fine.
He was also charged for molesting a 13-year-old boy.
Ugh.
And thankfully, this stopped him for about 8 months when he was sentenced to serve time in a work camp, which
Okay.
I didn't even know still existed at that time, especially in the United States.
Yeah, I'm surprised because that seems pretty late.
Yeah, and I like tried looking it up, and all I kept getting were like concentration camps in the typical countries that like
Gotcha.
you think would have them, right? In like Europe and
Right.
stuff. So I
Hmm.
I tried finding information on it and I couldn't. So
Okay.
unless it was something to do with like that movie Holes, where they went to
Yeah.
like that like camp.
Yeah.
But yeah, so maybe it's something to do
Okay.
with that. I don't know.
Who knows?
When he was released, he moved into his own place. So yay for not storing dead body parts in his grandma's house anymore.
Yeah, I'm sure she appreciated that.
Yes. But he took Sears' body pieces with him.
Oh,
Over another 2 year
okay.
time span, he would commit the majority of his murders. He would bring young men back to his home, sometimes offering to pay them money if they posed nude for him, and then he would drug, rape, and then kill them.
Mm.
Although he was honest in the fact he wanted them to pose nude for him, it was technically after he had already murdered them and then dissolved their flesh and bones.
Oh, okay.
Um, he would then also keep heads as trophies, and he decided to try different methods of preserving them, which, this is sad, ended up with the head of Edward Smith being blown up when he attempted to dry it out in his oven.
Oh God.
Yeah, getting
Wow.
so nauseous. And here we are, the point where he also began to store body parts in the fridge
Mm.
in order to feed on his victims at a later date.
Yeah.
So here is where the Cannibal of Milwaukee comes in.
Mm-hmm.
He also decided that he was going to start drilling holes in his victims' heads while they were drugged and still very much alive.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he did this because he wanted to create living zombies.
Yeah.
Once the holes were drilled, he would then pour hydrochloric acid into the hole onto their brain, which is just horrible.
Yes.
So, so horrible.
Absolutely.
Um, he had actually used this technique on a young boy named, gonna butcher this, Synthesomphone. Synthesomphone. Just gonna call him Sin.
Okay.
Which I will tell this guy's story in just a minute, but
Okay.
I just wanted to we need to remember that he had that hole drilled into his head and the hydrochloric acid poured onto his brain.
Okay.
During this time, Dahmer was compliant with keeping in touch with his parole officer from when he originally went to jail for molesting that boy.
Mm-hmm.
But his parole officer didn't suspect anything wrong going on with Dahmer.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where sin comes into play. On March 27th, 1991, Milwaukee police officers responded to a very odd call.
Oh God, I remember this.
Yes. So three women, let me just be specific that it was women that called.
And it was women of color.
Yes. Were with a crying and disoriented young boy who was naked and bleeding. These women were adamant that the police needed to help the boy because he was obviously very hurt and needed medical attention. It was at this point in time that Dahmer actually joined the group and told the officers that the boy was in fact 19 years old and he was his lover and that he was just drunk.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, he had that hole drilled in his head, the acid poured onto his brain, which made it impossible for Sin to communicate with the officers.
It was just like he was so close to help.
So close to help. It's
Mm.
so, so sad, especially because he was only 14 years old.
Yeah.
The officers then thought nothing of it and escorted Dahmer and this boy back to Dahmer's apartment, even though Sin was struggling against them, clearly not wanting to go back. These women who phoned this in began pointing out that there was blood coming from the boy's butt, and he was very clearly trying to get away from Dahmer. The officers, who I might add were men.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and let me just preface this by saying I don't have anything against men. It's just things like this really get to me when men, especially men in power,
Mm-hmm.
are not like accepting of women and their opinion and their thoughts. And so, anyways,
Well, and I heard or I read that too, that they think part of it was, because like you said, being gay back then was not something that was widely accepted,
yeah,
and it made them uncomfortable and they didn't want to deal with it.
that's that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Um, anyways, these men told the women to shut the hell up and said they had like they didn't know anything about this domestic dispute and that they just needed to
Mhm.
shut up and go away.
Yeah. I'm sorry, if someone's bleeding from their butt, like that's not
That's not
okay.
okay. Even if you're in a relationship with that person,
Right.
that is
Right.
not okay.
No. So,
2 months later, as we can all very well imagine, it would be discovered that it was 14-year-old Connoric Synthesymphone. And unfortunately, this poor little boy never made it out of Dahmer's grasps. Never left his house.
yeah.
And had the officers done a proper background check on Dahmer, they would have potentially discovered that he was a sex offender and had actually molested Sin's older brother previously. His final victim arrived, and this final victim would thankfully be his undoing. On July 22nd, 1991, he lured 32-year-old Tracy Edwards.
Oh, wow, that was a bit old for him.
Yes. Back to his apartment on the promise of payment for nude photos.
Okay.
Dahmer then handcuffed Edwards and intimidated him with a knife, telling him to undress. Dahmer repeatedly said he was going to cut out Edwards' heart and eat it, while placing his ear against Edwards' chest and rocking back and forth.
Oh my gosh.
He wanted to feel close to him.
Right.
Edwards was smart, however, and told Dahmer that they were friends and that they should just sit and watch some TV for a little bit. This, oddly enough, worked, and when Dahmer wasn't paying attention, Edwards punched him in the face and booked it the heck out of there.
Good for him.
Yeah, he was a friggin' badass.
Yeah.
He's like, nope. So once he escaped, he was thankfully able to flag down a police officer, and then he led them to Dahmer's apartment where they found photos of dismembered corpses. Dahmer obviously resisted arrest, but he was finally detained and handcuffed. The officers searched his apartment and found numerous dismembered body parts, including 4 severed heads, 7 skulls, and 2 hearts.
Can you imagine being the officers that found that?
Absolutely not.
Oh my gosh.
It's probably like the most horrific scene that they've ever seen in their whole career.
Oh, I'm sure.
So he was immediately brought into the police station, and he admitted to all 17 murders, which is great.
Yeah.
At trial, he pled guilty to 15 of those and was given 15 life sentences plus 70 years.
Wow.
Do you know what a life sentence is?
Isn't it 99 years?
No. So I looked it up. I mean, I always thought that it would have been like a lifetime, like a lot longer. But I looked it up and apparently it's only 20 years.
What?
But that's what the internet told me.
Okay.
A life sentence means a person in prison for 15 years with the chance of parole.
15.
Yeah, and
How
then
is that life?
somewhere else says 25. I don't know.
How is that life?
I have no idea. But, I mean, he has 15 of those.
Yeah, plus 70.
Exactly. So, yeah, that's over 300 years.
Yeah.
Which I never understood. Why would you give them that much when obviously they're never going to?
Well, I think that eliminates any chance of like parole.
Yeah, it's
You know what I
true.
mean? Okay. And plus, like, they always do like, you'll lose time for good behavior. You can cut back time for this or cut back time for that. So I think, that's another
True.
way to make sure that they're just never getting out.
That's very true. So he was then sentenced to serve his time at Columbia Correctional Institute, where he was interviewed multiple times and donned one of the worst serial killers in history.
Yeah, I would think so.
While in prison, he contemplated suicide multiple times. However, in November 1994, Dahmer was beaten to death by a fellow murder inmate by a metal bar in the bathroom.
Oh, geez. Well, he deserved it.
Yeah, so the man who killed Dahmer indicated that Dahmer didn't fight back and didn't make a single sound. He simply accepted his fate.
That makes sense, just knowing kind of how he was after that. And even during, like, he was a very demure, kind of, I don't want to say weak, but weak person unless he had been drinking and he had control.
Yeah. Well, so I I get the whole, like he deserved it. He deserved to die, especially like that kind of way. But at the same time, I would have liked it if he had have rotted to death in prison.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Like, so I'm always like so conflicted, right? It's like, oh, should they get the death penalty or should they
Mhm.
suffer or, like if they get murdered while they're in prison or
Right.
so
Yeah.
it's always so hard to like figure out what you would want.
Right. Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, so he was killed in prison in a bathroom.
Gotcha.
And now I'm going to move on to the interview.
'Kay.
It was him, his mom, and his dad. And this interview took place in 1994, and it was conducted
Okay.
by Stone Phillips.
Ooh.
Imagine having the first name of Stone.
Such a cool name. You
It is
better do
such a.
something cool with your life.
That's the thing. It's like, oh no, if you have like a cool name like that, like you
Like, you can't
said,
be an accountant.
no, that'd be so boring. So it'd be such pressure.
Yeah.
Dahmer's father stated that Dahmer was polite and seemed very normal growing up, which don't all serial killers.
Yeah, right.
His dad visits him at least once a month in jail, but they don't actually talk about the crimes. They just talk about how family is doing, how things used to be, what prison is like, etc.
Yeah. I think as a father, you wouldn't be able to because it would be too hard to imagine your child being like that.
Well, his dad actually wrote a book. That's why they were doing this interview, because his dad wrote a book about Dahmer and everything like that.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay, well,
uh,
never mind.
but I mean, like when you're seeing your son, like, I mean, it would be hard to talk about that kind of stuff, right? Especially because
Yeah.
you went through all the court trials and everything like that. So,
Mhm.
Dahmer stated his childhood wasn't filled with any tragedy and that it was actually fairly normal. However, there was fighting in the home due to his parents separating, and he feels that he was withdrawing from his reality into his own head to escape the tensions,
Mm,
which is
yeah,
where,
I mean, a lot of people's parents get divorced and they don't end up eating people, but sure.
yeah. But I mean, it goes into that whole sexual fantasy realm, right? Where I might honestly do an episode on it because I wrote a paper on the role of sexual fantasies
Mhm.
in those types of crimes. So they withdraw into their head, and that's the only thing that they can like use to escape from it. And then
Mhm.
eventually the urge just becomes too powerful, and then it just becomes a reality.
Right.
So, but he thinks that that had something to do with it, but not like it wasn't to blame for it.
Right. Okay.
He said that his fascination started to grow in grade 9 when he took a fetal pig home,
Oh,
which
wow.
then branched to dogs and cats. And then that kind
Mm.
of veered off into what took place.
Yeah.
He said he doesn't know why he did it or like why it happened. He just
Mhm.
wanted to know what the insides looked like. And he said he found pleasure cutting into them. And it was a sense of power, like cutting into those animals.
Poor babies.
Yeah. Dahmer stated that when he was younger, he didn't have much control. So his biggest motive was to be in complete control of the situation and over another person.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
He stated he began to slip away around the age of 14 when he was having obsessive, violent, and sexual thoughts. He kept all of his feelings bottled up since he didn't want to tell anybody. Which,
Yeah, I can see why.
yeah, which, I mean, don't keep your feelings bottled up because it's not great for you, but especially in this
Yeah, I mean,
situation.
definitely you should open up to a therapist
Yes.
and get that stuff out and get help.
Yes, because
But I can see why he wouldn't want to talk to anybody else about it.
but I mean, I think honestly, a lot of people have violent thoughts, but like not everybody obviously acts on them.
No, Jessica, you're just weird too. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh my gosh. But you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, for sure, for
yeah,
sure.
and it's, I don't know.
Well, and there's, things called intrusive thoughts as well that
Yes,
a lot of people have, but you don't act on it.
exactly. Like, oh, I wonder what it would be like if I just drove my car off the road right now.
Right, yeah, like I could just drive into this side rail,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
but you don't do it.
No, you talk to a therapist about it.
Yeah, exactly.
From the age of 15, he had recurring fantasy of picking up a hitchhiker, taking this hitchhiker hostage, etc. And as we just learned, that was his first victim, a
Right,
hitchhiker. So
right.
his fantasy very much so became his reality.
Yeah.
Dahmer states that he couldn't stop doing what he was doing because the compulsion was too intense. And even though most of his victims were of African American descent, he stated that race didn't matter and that all he wanted to do was find the most attractive man out there. When asked why he turned to cannibalism, he stated it was because it made him feel that his victims were a part of him, which
Mhm.
just fueled the sexual aspect even more.
Yeah.
His family actually knew nothing of what he was doing and learned everything at the trial and through subsequent interviews and confessions, according
Can
to
you
his father.
imagine?
No,
Oh my gosh.
no, I could not imagine at all. Dahmer had stated that he feels regret and sorrow for what he did. And what do you think about that? Do you think he actually meant that? Or because he's a psychopath, he's just playing to the cameras?
It's a tough one. I mean, I honestly I don't think I don't know get words out, Ashley. I don't know that I necessarily think he was a sociopath.
No, he's a
Uh,
psychopath. I said he was a psychopath.
I don't necessarily think that he was a psychopath.
Because literally, when I
Um,
looked it up, I'm like, is Jeffrey Dahmer a psychopath or a sociopath? And it came up as a psychopath.
yeah, I mean, there's a very slight difference between the two,
Yeah,
but
I think sociopaths just have no um, feelings and emotions.
right. And then psychopaths. What is psychopaths are?
Okay.
They also don't have feelings or emotions, but what's the difference?
Okay, I'm looking it up. Okay. So, sociopaths often blame others and have excuses for their behavior. Some experts say that sociopaths are hot headed. They act without thinking how others will be affected.
Okay.
Psychopaths are more cold hearted and calculating, which is exactly
Okay.
Dahmer.
Okay, so my thought. Most of these crimes he did when he was drunk. Um and I don't know. I don't know. I feel like he truly did have remorse for what he did after the fact, but I feel like while he was in it, he didn't.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like during that 2-year period where he was doing all of that. I don't think he did. And I think that part of that was that he didn't have to face reality because he was drunk all the time.
that makes sense.
And then once he had to actually face the reality of what he did, I feel like, but at the same time, I don't think a normal person does that. You know what I
No,
mean? So it's like there was something obviously wrong with him, and I don't think a normal person could do something like that. So he had to have that part of the psychopath that is cold-hearted to be able to do that to people.
Yeah.
And it was very, like, selfish of what he wanted, like, he just wanted them to be with him no matter what. It was a very self-involved crime, you know?
Yes, exactly.
So that's why I'm kinda like that's why I kinda went back and forth because I don't know, I can see both ways, you know?
Yeah, same here. So that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I'm basically the same way. It's like watching him in the interview, it's like, yeah, maybe he did, especially because of how he talked about that one incident in the hotel, like his second victim, where he like didn't know that it happened, and then all of a sudden he saw his
Mhm,
hand was bruised and the guy was dead on the floor, right? So
mhm.
like when he was talking about that, you could kind of see like a glimmer of something,
Yeah, yeah.
but I don't know, it's just so weird. Um, so
Whereas, like, someone like Ted Bundy, absolutely not, he never felt
oh,
remorse,
not at all.
you know? So it's just yeah.
Um, it's learned during this interview, as it was also written in the book that his father wrote, that his father also had fantasies of murder and he had obsessions with fire.
Really?
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yes, and that's the first time that Dahmer learned about that was from reading the book that his father made.
Okay.
So it's interesting to see, but it also shows that like your compulsions can be under control.
Yeah, for sure.
So Dahmer expressed anger over other people blaming his parents for how he turned out. And he stated that anyone who blames others for how they turned out and the crimes they committed is just using that as an excuse, and he takes 100% responsibility for his crimes. Which is why I don't think he's a sociopath, because sociopaths blame others.
Right, yeah.
So, and he specifically said, like, I take full responsibility for what I did.
And he
I,
confessed right away, like, he
yeah,
didn't try and hide it, you know?
exactly.
Not by any means saying he's a good guy.
No, 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 no,
By
no.
any means.
No, 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 no. Not at all what we're saying. It's just, it is nice to see if they do have remorse, whether or not that
Mhm.
remorse is legitimate or not. But
Right, right.
I'd rather you confess to everything as
Yes.
opposed to those that don't confess to anything and then families are just like sitting in the dark.
Yeah, or try and play games
Yeah.
and yeah.
So, he also, while in jail, he accepted Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior since entering
Mhm.
prison, and he is now accountable to him.
Okay.
When he left home, he was accountable to no one and wanted to be in control. And then he is now accountable to Jesus. So,
Okay, well,
anyways,
hopefully that makes him nicer.
this part was kind of sweet. And again, I'm not entirely sure if he was being genuine or just saying what he knows he should say.
Right.
But the interviewer asked Dahmer if his dad had missed any signs of his behavior escalating when he was growing up. So they zoomed in on his father's face, who looked like he was really hurting and he was about to cry.
Oh.
And then Dahmer stated no, that there were no outward signs that anyone would have been able to see since he kept everything tucked away. And then you can visually see the relief wash over his father's face.
Oh.
Because, like, he'd probably gone all this time thinking he missed something. And then
Yeah.
to have his son confirm, like, no, you didn't miss anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you would 100% start going back and dissecting
Yeah,
every conversation you had with your son, every activity you did with your son, you
exactly.
know,
That's the thing,
and being
right?
like, "What did I miss?"
Yeah. So it was probably, like, really nice for him to hear whether it was true or not.
Right.
But it would still be very relieving to hear that.
Yeah, for sure.
um so as his interview like went more on and on, his
Mhm.
father seems like a controlled whack job.
Really?
Like, do you understand what I mean by that?
Like, he's kinda crazy, but keeping it in check?
Yeah, like he just seems like really wackadoodle. But obviously like things are kept in control and like tucked away.
Mhm.
So I don't know, it's just very weird. Like And they kind of, the both of them like kind of speak the same way too, like very slow, controlled, and deliberate.
Okay. Interesting.
It was very odd,
Yeah.
but they seemed like scarily similar. And especially like with the fact that his dad like has those thoughts, right? So
Mhm. Yeah.
very interesting. Um so then we move on to the interview with his mom.
Mhm.
uh this lady. She found out about her son's crimes through a friend who told her to turn on the news.
Oh no.
Yeah. Where they were like showing everything.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. She says she doesn't have the right to mourn. Mourn what? I'm not sure. Like her sweet innocent child? Who knows?
Probably
Um,
just like the loss of her child, going to jail.
I guess, yeah. Because there are families out there that will never get to speak to their son, brother, etc. ever again. And she
Right.
still gets to speak to her son.
Right.
Okay. Let me just pause for a second. Ashley,
Jessica.
if your child
Oh god.
committed heinous crimes such as this, would you want a relationship with them? Would you visit them or speak to them?
I don't know. That's such a hard question because you love your child unconditionally,
Mm-hmm.
but you would be so disgusted by what they've become.
Yeah.
But would I abandon them? I don't know.
Okay. So the only reason I'm asking this is because his father visits him like multiple times a month.
Mhm.
Their relationship has gotten stronger,
Okay.
and his mom like is closer with him too.
Okay.
And it's like I could never look at my child the same way again. Personally, like I understand the whole timeless love, unconditional love thing, but and like I don't think I'd completely abandon them, but I definitely wouldn't like be visiting them multiple times a week. Like I'd be scared of them.
Yeah, I think you'd almost have to compartmentalize and think of them as two different people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's my son who I love, and then there's this monster, and
Mhm.
just try and separate them in your head.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I
I don't
just
know.
I think it would
God, I
be
can't
too
even.
overwhelming, so I don't who knows?
Yeah.
Hopefully my kid's okay.
Yeah, hopefully we don't ever have to make that decision.
Yeah. That'd be nice if we didn't have to. So she also didn't see any signs of what was to come and said that he was a wonderful boy and he was never abused as a child. A first grade teacher said he was extremely shy and depressed, but his mom doesn't believe that and thinks it's shit that people say things like that. Because she just didn't see it, right? And
Right.
so yeah, like it kind of like you said, like in denial about the whole
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, definitely
Yeah,
compartmentalizing the two people.
yeah, which is gonna become
Or
very
the one person into two people.
yes, which is gonna become even more clear as we
Gotcha.
move along. So his parents argued a lot when he was growing up, like his father said as well.
Mhm.
But his mom doesn't think it was that bad.
Okay.
And she said that it had no effect on her children since it wasn't physical abuse.
Okay.
Yes. So it wasn't physical abuse, so my children weren't affected.
Right. Okay. Okay. I'm starting to see how Dahmer got so fucked up.
Yes. His mom is a wacko, honestly.
Yeah, sounds like it.
And she's very dramatic.
Well, and it seems like she's very much like, no, it's not my fault. I didn't do
Yeah,
anything.
exactly.
You know?
Like not taking responsibility for literally anything.
Yeah.
Um, so it appeared to me as though she was holding back the intensity of their fights, like between her and her ex-husband.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, She didn't want to appear to be any percentage at fault or come across as
Right.
negatively affecting her son in any way.
Right.
On the flip side, her ex husband constantly admitted that the fights got pretty intense verbally,
Mhm.
and that he even noticed Dahmer needing to leave the house on multiple occasions to get away from it.
Gotcha.
And Dahmer even states he had to get away from the tense situation, and that's kind of where it started, where he like slipped away from reality and blah blah blah.
Mhm.
So I wrote so LOL. This his mom is writing a book because the father successfully completed in writing one as well.
Oh, so she's gotta tap him.
Yes, but hers actually went nowhere and she never finished it.
Oh, okay.
So she had like a friend of hers there, whoever, like someone that was helping her with the book, just sitting beside her during the interview because she's like, well, she has to be here. And when the interview like originally aired, the lady was cropped out, so like none of her shit got on air.
Mhm.
But for this one, like they included stuff that this friend was saying. And this lady, like, so friggin' stupid. This lady kept interrupting Stone when she felt questions were too much and told Dahmer's mom that she didn't have to answer if she didn't want to, and she was constantly arguing with Stone.
She's not her lawyer.
I know, and she's not even the one being interviewed.
Yeah.
So like it's so friggin' stupid. They're so dumb.
Wow.
Um and if you could see Stone's face this whole interview, he even said it. So she was basically trying, like she was getting so angry at his mom because she kept accusing everyone of blaming her and like for Dahmer's upbringing.
Mm.
Yet she wouldn't answer the questions that could clear this up, and she just kept arguing with Stone. And he even said at one point that that's why he was doing this, to get her side of things.
Well, and it's so funny because you know he was going in thinking that, like, Jeffrey was gonna be the weirdest, most difficult one,
Yeah.
and it turns out to be the mom.
Yeah. And like, yeah, she was like constantly arguing with the interviewer, like not answering questions that she thought were too difficult. And then like being fed up with people, like thinking that she was something else.
Wow.
It's like, okay, you're literally here to answer these tough questions. Like, you know why you're here.
Yeah.
Like, it just, oh, she's so stupid. Um, so when she was told about certain aspects from her ex-husband's book as it pertained to Dahmer and how he was growing up or certain circumstances,
Mhm.
she would always say that never happened. Yet,
Wow.
through my research, and like I stated earlier, it appeared as though she wasn't home very much. So,
Right, so how would she even know?
yeah, literally. Like, you're not going to be around for every single second of your child's upbringing.
Right, if you just disappear.
It's so ridiculous.
It sounds like maybe she was a sociopath.
Yes, that's what I was thinking too. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or a narcissist. Or both.
Probably both. um, I did find though that the father asked questions of himself and tried to find answers to see if there was anything else he could have done to have prevented this, and
Mhm.
always wondered if he had done something, whereas the mom essentially ignored everything and didn't want
Gotcha.
to answer those tough questions or take any accountability.
Yeah.
So even though they're both kind of wacky, I think his mom is probably like the wackiest
Yeah.
out of the two parents. So
Sounds like it.
yeah, a little cray cray. uh and just to finish this off in a very very creepy way,
Perfect.
Dahmer could have been caught years before he was eventually caught.
Oh.
Because his father, okay, so I kind of zoned out at this point of the interview because
Mhm.
it was nearing the end and his dad was beginning to bug me. So I don't know like the whole specifics of it, but essentially his dad found a steel box in Dahmer's closet one day.
Oh! Oh, I remember
Yeah, and
this!
he was going to open it. And
Yes.
then for some reason he just didn't.
Mhm.
And inside was the mummified head and genitals of one of Dahmer's victims.
Yeah, so Dahmer told him not to open it. Um, and he was like, "Why?" And he was like, "Well," I think he, like, finally convinced him that it was just, like, porno mags in
Okay.
there that he didn't want his grandma to find, because this is when he was living with his grandma.
Yes. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
that was Stephen Tuomi's head and genitals.
Oh my
'Cause
gosh.
remember
Yeah,
he
I
took it with
remember.
him when he moved out from his grandma's house.
Yeah.
And then he was done the interview and he saw like a little steel um box or whatever on the table. It was like for the camera equipment. And he's
Mhm.
like, that's what it looked like.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So the interviewer was like, holy crap, okay.
Cool.
That's interesting.
Thanks.
Yeah. Um, but in the end, Dahmer actually stated he was relieved to finally have been caught because he doesn't have to pretend anymore. And because
Mm.
he still has those obsessive thoughts, which means he would have just kept on going.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder, like, obviously those don't stop, so what happens to them when they're in prison? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of men in there.
Yeah.
You know,
But I'm
shower
sure
scenes.
quite a bit bigger than him. Jeffrey Dahmer was tall, but he was not a big boy.
No, at his last interview, he was like kind of getting a little chubbier.
Was he?
Yeah, but I think that's probably just because he wasn't doing that rigorous activity anymore. So,
Yeah, for sure.
but anyways, that's my Jeffrey Dahmer story.
Oh my gosh, that was so good. It
Oh, thank you.
was so good. I
It
loved
was
it.
crazy pants.
Yeah.
Oh, crazy, crazy pants.
Well, that was a very um heavy episode.
Sorry, everybody.
Not a lot of laughs in this one, but that's
We
okay.
had a lot of like uncomfortable laughter.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, if we ever like laugh during heavy episodes, please note that it's like from being very uncomfortable with the subject
Uncomfortable and awkward.
and like we don't know what else to do.
Yes, exactly.
We're not laughing at the situation, so
Never, 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 never.
never.
Well, if you want more of us, you can find us on TikTok at Histories and Mysteries Pod. We are on both Facebook and Instagram at Histories and Mysteries. And you can email us at historiesandmysteries515 at gmail.com. And we are officially out of spooky season, but we will keep the spooks on coming.
Yeah, and next week will be very fun. So hopefully you guys tune in then too.
Yeah.
Anyways, bye everybody. Have a great week.
Bye. Have a good week.